There is something enigmatic about March 7th, or perhaps I should call her Evernight. The name Evernight was chosen by March herself because the third month in Amphoria's calendar system is reserved for Onyx the Veil of Evernight. She named herself March 7th because it was when she was rescued by the Express crew according to the Trailblaze calendar system. So naturally, this other version should be called Evernight. I suppose Argenti's companion quest was a foreshadowing to March's duality all along. Remember that quest from 1.5? The Express was swallowed by a giant sting of propagation, and because of the pheromones released by the bugs, those who inhaled it started hallucinating their deepest desires. March hallucinated herself, a version of herself who claimed to be the complete version of March 7th.
I know your past. The things you want to see, to touch, to know. Your home, family, friends, emotions, what you love and what you despise. I'm the complete March 7th, with all of your forgotten memories.
The demeanor of this other March is completely different from the March that we know, her confident, almost sinister smile, similar to Evernight. After learning that it was merely a hallucination, March expressed her disappointment. The experience to her felt like meeting her long-lost twin sister, and for a second there, she really thought she might have gotten some information about her past. Weirdly enough, if it was merely a hallucination, why did she see her own self? March asked this question a lot throughout the quest. Perhaps this other March is another version of March, suppressed by the remembrance. Which makes me wonder if the two moons in Amphorius are meant to represent March and Evernight. According to Amphorius' legend, these two moons are remnants of Onyx's little shenanigans in their attempt to rival Aquila's 100 Eyes. Originally, Onyx had managed to create up to 6 moons and put them up in the sky of Amphorius, a moon created one night after another, but they caused chaos in the oceans which annoyed Fugusa. So Fugusa made Onyx drink until they're drunk on the 7th night, thus keeping moon creation on that evening. And to restore balance, Talenton destroyed 4 moons, leaving the scarlet and golden moons in the sky. We can see these moons from Styxia. This legend was how I theorized that March was the one who would get Onyx's core flame instead of Trailblazer. I got that half correct there. March is getting Onyx's core flame just 1 ER later. Now, according to Lycus, Legends in the current cycle is an altered version of an event that took place in the previous one. For example, Calypso, the risen demigod in the previous cycle, rebuilt the growth in her time as a human. Once that cycle was completed and Calypso became Circe's in this cycle, the growth restoration was inherited as myth in the form of Circe's granting wisdom to humans. Onyx creating 6 moons and then losing 4 of them is perhaps an alteration of an actual event that happened when Onyx was still human as well. Anyways, these moons are also mentioned in the Evernight chapter of the SF Written book. It says, 2 moons hang on the veil of Evernight's scroll. Their lights intertwine and shimmer in and out of sight like the whirlwinds of a dance. It is said that pearls of laughter from the sky dome could be heard at the beginning of a moon cycle, dispelling the solitude of the Evernight. Were those the mumbling of time or the voice of someone you once knew? The text on the top right corner of Evernight's splash art says, "We were never apart." Interestingly, out of all the other Crisis Air character introductions, this is the first one where it is spoken in first-person point of view with the narrator including themselves in the monologue. Previously, it is always the narrator talking about or at the Chrysos Heirs. With Phynon specifically, the narrator seemed to be directly talking to him, asking, "Did you see? Amphorius has ushered in the new dawn." For those introduction, I am of the opinion that the narrator was Cyrene, because she and Phynon were the Chrysos Heirs responsible for the eternal recurrence, which they committed to in hopes that the pale dawn would arrive to save the world. So Cyrene asking Phynon if he had noticed the arrival of that pale dawn makes sense to me. However, now with Evernight, the narrator seems to be a different person. They include themselves in the conversation, we instead of you. It is most likely Evernight talking to March directly, revealing to her that they were never apart, just like the 2 moons of Amphorius that are always together in the night sky. Alternatively, this could be March/Evernight talking to Trailblazer. As of writing this video, Dan Heng's drip marketing has also been released, and the text on top says, "Let's work towards tomorrow together," which also sounds like what Dan Heng would say to Trailblazer. By the way, if you got this far into the video, what do you think of this analysis so far? Would you like to see more in the future? Last time I did this was with Ting Yun's drip marketing, which technically was also the first, and then I just never did it again. So yeah, let me know if you want me to cover more in the future. Now, the character introduction says, in the secluded memory zone, candlelight casts echoes of the past, softly fading away in the mist. Candlelight symbolizes remembrance. It is there in the symbol of the path and in the room that Black Swan was in the Fables About the Stars Part 1 video. So, candlelight casts echoes of the past could be read as remembrance projects memories of the past. Evernight, child of remembrance born from the shadow, it says, the memories casted by remembrance created a shadow and out of which Evernight was born, hence child of remembrance. Then the drip marketing continues, Crisis heir who conceals the core flame of time, you shall stir the tide of oblivion, guarding the wish of the mirrored soul. As we still don't know where March is in Amphorius, we still don't know if she's been there since the start of Amphorius' quest or not, but she's most likely going to show up in the next ER if the Deliver trailer is anything to go by. While Trailblazer filled in Sirene's role as Time Demigod in the previous ER, Trailblazer is taking over Kaslana's role in the next one, making the Time Demigod role vacant once again. March, who might have or might not have been in the simulation since the beginning, will take over this role from Trailblazer. However, instead of inheriting or reclaiming, what Evernight would do is concealing the Time Core Flame. Not only that, she would also stir the tide of oblivion. This role, combined with how she came to be, a child of remembrance born from the shadow to conceal the truth, screams Enigmata to me. Mythos the Enigmata was said to be born out of remembrance, so in a way, we could say that Enigmata is a child of remembrance. Herda said that Enigmata was as destructive to the simulated universe as the simulated Aha was, which gave this path a bad rap. Meanwhile, in Amphorius, it was Elation that protected Akuma. Cypher, the demigod of trickery, the simulated path of Elation in Amphorius, found out that Kefli's Dawn device was only meant to protect Akuma for 300 years maximum. Compelled to her responsibility as a demigod, wanting to prove that she's worthy of Aglaya's trust, Cypher lied in public to make everyone believe that Dawn device would protect the city forever. Thanks to the power of trickery, once this lie was believed by the masses, it became the truth that sustained the world for over a millennia. Point is, the simulated path of Elation turns out to be not a mere destructive force in Amphorius. Plus, it was simulated Aha that actually helped Herda and friends in the simulated universe when they were chased around by simulated Polka Kakemon. So, if Herda's take on Elation could be misguided, perhaps Enigmata is not that destructive either. Their one goal is to challenge the certainty brought by erudition. Amphorius is a simulated world extrapolated by a scepter that used to be part of Nusus neuron cluster. The scepter has gone through millions of extrapolations to perfect the simulation, designing it in such a way that the simulated people would behave in certain ways to achieve one definite ending. Era Nova. Everything has always gone according to the scepter's calculation. The future is predetermined. However, Cyrene and Kaslana refused to bend their knees to this predestined future, choosing to put Amphorius in a long dream instead of embracing the destruction and letting the Iron Tomb exit the simulation. They erased time from Amphorius and by extension Cyrene, the bearer of time authority. Then Kaslana would take the core flames for himself, preventing it to be returned to the vortex of Genesis until eventually he reset the cycle and repeat. From the very first reset, Kaslana knew that this was pointless. At best, this could only prevent the completion of the cycle. They could never alter its predetermined ending. The past determines the future, but no matter how many resets he did, Kaslana always arrived at the beginning of the Flamechief's journey, always over 100 years after Trebius took up Janus' core flame. However, once we add Enigmata to the mix, the path that is all about obscuring the past to prevent a predetermined future, we might just have a winning chance in this fight. Enigmata was born out of remembrance to oppose erudition. For Evernight to be a simulated Enigmata, born to conceal the simulated path of remembrance in hopes to alter the predetermined future set by a discarded neuron cluster of erudition, that sounds pretty lore accurate to me. But yes, of course, we cannot ignore the fact that Evernight seems to embody veracity in her design. I mean, she swallowed Amphorius in the trailer, there are teeth on the left arm of her jacket, an open white mouth that represents veracity on the other side of her umbrella. That screams veracity, alright? However, there are elements that represent other paths as well. One that is most prominent is the jellyfish. This represents Mythos the Enigmata, but also Fully, because there's also a jellyfish in Fully's design if you squint hard enough. Then there are candles and a mirror that remind me of remembrance, but also of Idrilla the Beauty. Mirror of Transcendence, an occurrence in the simulated universe, talks about an offering ritual one must do in hopes to get a glimpse of Idrilla. It involves lighting 3 candles that are placed in front of a massive fragment of the Mirror of Transcendence. Interestingly, March also has a mirror in her room. Trailblazer noted that this mirror did not reflect their appearance, assuming that perhaps it only wanted to show March's reflection. I love this mindset of Trailblazers, by the way. They see a mirror that does not reflect their reflection and then proceed to assume that it only reflects the appearance of the mirror's owner and think, yeah, that sounds about right. No further question asked. In the Evernight chapter of the Sephiroth book, there's also the mention of a mirror.
Don't be scared. Please don't be afraid.
A familiar voice rings out in the mirror.
An implication that the mother Ornyx talked to lives on the other side of the mirror, and it was via the mirror that they were communicating. So, Evernight has elements of enigmata, voracity, remembrance, and beauty in her splash art. We can identify each and every element, but the more we identify them, the more we don't know who she really is. And haven't we encountered someone like this before? Remember Gallagher? A fictional individual created from the combined traits of 52 family members, tiny truths woven together into a lie that made up his character. The creator of this fictional self was a history fictionologist, an emanator of Enigmata. That could be what Evernight is, a follower of Enigmata who put together these different elements to throw people off to hide her true nature. Perhaps March coming up with 67 versions of her past is a harmless version of this enigmatic approach in defining herself. There is something enigmatic about Evernight, and that is perhaps her intention all along. I hope she shows up in 3.5 so we can learn more about her.